The mall used to operate without the need for an overnight security guard, but vandalism became a growing concern. Most nights, I drove around the parking lot, listening to my car radio. Occasionally, I would need to kick skateboarders out of the lot or investigate suspicious individuals lurking about. Overall, the job was fairly uneventful. About 3 months into my position, I encountered something strange. While patrolling the parking lot, I noticed that the light in one of the shops was on. This surprised me since no one had slipped past me. Curious, I parked my car and headed inside the mall to catch any potential thieves. As I approached the shop, I didn't hear anyone rummaging through the inventory. Sure enough, the shop was empty and the security gate was still down. Only the shop owners had access to the gates, so I couldn't do anything about the light being on. I returned to my car. After about an hour with no incidents, I saw another light on inside the mall. Again, the security gate was closed. I tugged on it to see if someone was hiding, but it was locked. Suddenly, I heard a click behind me and the previous light was off. I could have sworn I saw someone run behind the counter and hide. I was running on just 3 hours of sleep over the past 48 hours, so I attributed my experiences to fatigue. I shined my flashlight into the shop and scanned the area but saw nothing. Another click echoed behind me, and the light in the shop turned off again. This time I distinctly saw someone standing in there. I called out, "You can either leave with me or with the police." They didn't move, just stood next to the light switch. I approached the gate again and turned my light toward the switch, but there was no one there. A clothes rack was close to the switch, so I reasoned that the light might have cast a shadow. I left the mall, spooked but eventually able to put the incident out of my mind. For several months, my patrols were uneventful. My next strange encounter occurred around my 1-year anniversary as a guard. It was winter, and I was inside the mall checking the pipes. Although I was on security duty, the owners had me inspect various things to save money. While heading to the bathroom, I heard a toilet flush, startling me more than I'd like to admit. Inside the bathroom, I found no one. The toilets were motion activated, as is typical in most malls. After checking all the stalls and finding them empty, I sat down in one of them, watching a YouTube video on my phone. Then, I heard a tapping sound from the stall next to me. I glanced to my left and saw a pair of shoes with their toes pointing toward me. Slowly, I raised my eyes above the stall. To my shock, there stood the tallest man I had ever seen, staring down at me. Had I not already been on the toilet, I would have run home for new pants. When he noticed I was looking at him, he ducked down beneath the stall. I jumped up and kicked in the door to the neighboring stall, but it was empty, except for a pair of shoes in the same spot. My heart raced as I hurried back to my car. If I remember correctly, this happened around 4 a.m. I once again blamed it on my lack of sleep, relieved that I had the next day off. One night, my friend Jake and I decided to explore the infamous abandoned Rolling Acres Mall in Akron, Ohio. We arrived around 11 p.m. on a Wednesday, as we didn't have school the next day. We sneaked in through a door that had been forced open by previous visitors. Inside, it was pitch black, so we turned off our flashlights for a moment to appreciate the darkness. We explored the lower level before climbing up an escalator to the second level. As we shone our flashlights into old, closed-off stores, we heard a loud bang from further down the upper level. I felt a surge of fear and asked Jake if it could be security or police. He doubted it, suggesting it was likely just other explorers, but we decided to move in the opposite direction. As we passed by J.C. Penney, we heard another bang, louder and closer this time. We turned off our flashlights to stay hidden. Suddenly, I heard a muffled "psst" from ahead, which I assumed was Jake calling me. I kept hearing the sound, so I followed it. When I got close enough, I whispered, "Where do we go now?" But he didn't answer. I reached out and touched what I thought was his shoulder, but the fabric felt different from Jake's coat. When I turned on my flashlight, I screamed. The person I was holding on to wasn't Jake. It was a tall man wearing a beanie and a face mask. He grabbed me and put me in a headlock, trying to drag me away. Just then, Jake emerged from the darkness and landed a punch on the man's face, giving me a chance to escape. We ran back to the entrance and didn't stop until we reached my car. Once outside, we continued running until we felt safe, and I thanked Jake for potentially saving my life. I also worked in a 24/7 general store in a mall in South Carolina. While the mall closed at 9:30 p.m., our store remained open all night. There were two entrances, one from inside the mall and another back door for after-hours access. After 9:30, I had to shut the gate separating the store from the mall. Since it was a small store, the late-night hours were usually uneventful. However, one night shift proved to be anything but normal. Towards the middle of my shift, the gate was down, but I could still see into the dimly lit mall. I was organizing shelves when I heard a rattle at the metal cage. I looked up to see a man grasping the gate. At first, I thought he was a security guard, but as I approached and asked if he needed help, I realized he was just a random man. He wore a dirty black and white plaid shirt and baggy blue jeans, and he was staring up at the ceiling. I asked if he needed assistance, but he just kept shaking the gate, looking up. I didn't know what to do and turned my back to him, returning to my register. Unfortunately, the layout meant I could still see him. He eventually backed away, still gazing at the ceiling. I wondered where the security was. I thought at least one person should be monitoring the cameras at night. I tried to ignore the situation and resumed my work, but I couldn't help glancing outside occasionally. Thankfully, he was gone. Eventually, a customer entered the shop through the back door. I was between two shelves and couldn't see them, so I continued organizing. When I returned to the register, I noticed the customer standing at the end of the alcohol aisle looking up. I thought he was checking the top shelf, so I looked away. After bending down to put the broom away, I stood up and felt my heart nearly stop. The man was staring at me with a wide smile, not a grin, but a horrifyingly broad smile. I quickly realized he was the same man from earlier, now without his plaid shirt. We locked eyes in silence for what felt like 30 seconds, and I froze in fear. His smile was pure horror, as if he were a character from a nightmare. Finally, I opened my mouth to speak, trembling as I said, "Get out or I'll call the cops." He didn't move or blink. I ran to the back room and locked the door to call my manager, but she didn't answer after several attempts. When I gave up, I heard a gentle tap at the door. Not a knock, just a soft tap. I sat in the back room, a nervous wreck, for 5 minutes, wanting to be anywhere but there. Eventually, the fear of losing my job became greater than my fear of the man, so I stepped back outside to look around. But he was gone for good this time. Our shop had cameras, so everything was recorded. When my shift ended, I told my manager about the incident and showed her the video footage. She was shocked and disturbed. I worked there for another month before moving on, but I still remember that night vividly.